P-Waves Radio. I'm your host, Agro. This is the Steem panel discussion, or Steem witness forum, or Steem something. It's been a rough week. Everything is not necessarily awesome, but it seems to be going okay right now. I know that we have some very frustrated users in here, and that's part of why I think it's so important to host this right today. So I have the recording going, so just so everybody knows, this will be recorded, and I'll put out a post about this hopefully later today. It looks like I have Tim with me here. I can go pull in Jorky. Hi, how's it going, Tim?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay. Let's see. I have Yaba, or Matt is here with us. Let me go pull him on into the show. To move to live on air. I think we got an Androrky and a Luke. So let me go pull Luke into this live on air. And then Androrky. Roll, move, live on air. All right. So, hey, this is Hard Fork 20 week. Does anybody feel like kind of kicking this off? I don't have a very specific order for all this. This is, I imagine, going to be a little bit more chaotic than the normal ones. I'd like, I don't know, I guess let's do opening thoughts just to sort of kick this off. Maybe Androrky, if you want to go kick us off from a Steem perspective, that would be awesome. And then we'll just get whichever witnesses feel like speaking to just get a quick hello in here. And then I think it's going to be audience participation time. And I can start taking questions from people and start listening to whatever concerns they have. Does that sound okay, Androrky? Hello, Androrky? Hopefully people can hear me.
I can hear you, Agro.
Okay. Tim, do you want to start it off?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now, Androrky.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Do you want to go first? All right, then let's. I think that's an okay place to start. That is pretty standard format. But rather than sort of doing 30 to 45 minutes with Androrky only, let's just do, give us some opening thoughts, and we'll let some of the other witnesses in here do some opening thoughts, and then I'd like to go take questions from the audience, because I know that there are a bunch of questions.
Yeah, sure thing. I definitely don't want to talk too much. And I think that, the reason why I came by and the reason why I think that this is a good thing to be doing now is so that we can get this process started of, conversing about what to do better next time and what went wrong this time. And, obviously, nobody's happy with how this went. And so, yeah, I don't want to talk too much. And I'm eager to let everybody else get into their thoughts so that we can figure out how to move forward, because obviously, there's a lot of stuff we did wrong during this process. And so, I'm not going to come out here and be like, oh, here's what we did right. I think everybody here is well aware of a mistake that I personally made, which was a poor choice of words, which I take full responsibility for. I'm speaking of, that word that begins with sucks. So that was fully my fault. But yeah, I'm happy to hand it over to the rest of the the people in here and get the conversation going about what they feel went wrong and what they. I think the most important thing we could start talking about is what we can do going forward to make sure that we can keep improving this platform without having the types of events that transpired over the last week.
So before you get too skewered with memes, because I bet we're all getting skewered with memes, I just do want to say that although this week it wasn't this hasn't been my favorite communication week from Steemit, but I will say props to you in particular for having improved it 1,000-fold since you've been there. So, I think the messaging was off a bit this week, but I don't want to have that like held against you indefinitely. Like how much information we're getting from Steam, it has vastly improved because of your presence. So,
Thanks.
we can't.
Thanks. Yeah.
Can't get it all right,
Right.
This one was off, but you're doing amazing. So I just hope that you can rest easy tonight.
Well, nobody on Steam is resting easy. Although, I mean, today things are looking really solid. So maybe starting tonight or tomorrow, we'll be able to rest easy. I mean, I appreciate the kind words, and I just want to give some kind of behind the scenes perspective on that, which is that it's really hard. I mean, we could do better. 100% we can do better. Part of the difficulty is that when bugs arise like this, it's often very difficult to tell how things are going to proceed over the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So we're trying to construct communications as things are in flux. And sometimes we don't know, there's always so much we don't know. And like moving forward, I think one of the things there is consensus on is that the testing apparatus and protocols need to be vastly improved. And perhaps once we do that, and once we dramatically impact the effects of the bugs and the number of the bugs that come through, it'll be easier to communicate about these things. But when the bugs are of the type that got through this time, it was so difficult to actually even put our finger on, what would happen and then what the consequences of that would be. Like when we made that first post, part of the reason, in my opinion, why it seems so tone deaf is because I, maybe incorrectly, thought that the waters were going to be dramatically less choppy going forward than they wound up being due to a number of unknowns. And so in retrospect, it's like, oh, that was a terrible choice of words. But at the time, you're in a hurricane, and it's really hard to tell what's going to happen from one moment to the next. So just a little background there.
All right. Tim, Luke, Matt, anybody feel like kicking us off for just some thoughts from the witnesses? And if nobody wants to, I'm happy to. Tim?
Maybe we could go in order.
Sure. All right. Well, I'll kick it off. I mean, I think that this has been a pretty rough week. I know that we're on 20.5 already, so I currently have a witness replaying again. This is like the fourth or fifth, I guess it's the fifth time that we're doing this, of cycling through the various nodes and waiting on nodes and getting things patched. This has been quite it's been a hell of a week. And I know that users are really frustrated. I know that they're frustrated because the VP went down to nothing. There were negative credits. No activity was working on the blockchain. And I totally get why all of those things would lead to massive frustration. I mean, I think another frustration to me personally has been, when we were lined up and prepared for this, of like an implementation, but then once we got to implementation and it didn't go perfectly, and in fact, not even all that great, and maybe I should even start actually using negative words here, but it was a difficult transition, and then we all had to go wait for things like our PC nodes to replay and our witness nodes to replay, and it feels like the witnesses and the Steemit team might not be doing anything during that time, but we're just limited by technology. They actually had some of the fixes out pretty quickly, and the chain is working better now. So it in the grand scheme of things, it only took kind of a couple days for this thing to get tweaked back into functional and in a pretty good state, but I think the replays taking a long time has certainly hurt either our image or our uptime or just our ability to respond collectively. So I guess I'm sorry that this was a frustrating week. I can promise you, as a witness sitting here fiddling with witness boxes, this has been quite challenging and very time consuming. That's what we're paid for. That's why we're here. But it hasn't been all roses on this side either. We're just doing the best we can. Sorry that we let you down. And I guess my number one takeaway from all of this is that, I think these kinds of programs are so vast, and there are lots of changes, and maybe we can do less changes, but maybe that hurts exchanges. So I don't know what the right balance is there, but I guess my personal takeaway from this week has been, if we're really reliant on the replay time of the big RPC nodes. And so as I think about going forward, what's the biggest need that our chain has? I kind of think that bugs are going to slip through. That's just the reality of programming on a blockchain that is a functional blockchain. It's moving, there's activity, and we're trying to make changes to it. Bugs are going to happen and things are going to break from time to time as we try to improve the capabilities. And I think that, to me, my biggest learned lesson from all of this is we need much faster replay times, especially on the RPC nodes. So I've started looking into that. I'm trying not to pester the Steem devs too much, because they really do need to tweak some final parts of HF20 to really get it working. So, but kind of in a week or so, that's when I feel like I can start pushing around to say, hey, what's it take to get this thing faster, and what can I do to help that, or what bounties can I put out, or how can I organize people to make sure that happens? Luke?
That's a great summary. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Excellent. I'm just on my phone using push to talk, so if it doesn't come through, that might be why. Yeah, it's been a really tough week, and I think I really do appreciate you and Dreki. I think, again, as it's already been said, I think you're doing a great job to try and move Steem it forward as a more transparent and more actively communicating company. I do remember commenting on one of those, going, by disruptions, do we mean you're going to get errors and you can't do anything? That was kind of, I think we're moving towards where we need to be as far as just radical transparency and openness of reality. But I think we could still kind of make improvements, because so much frustration just comes from expectations. Those expectations don't get met and people get pretty upset. And I'm also realizing that, I had an interview with someone working on a Steem application, and realized that there's some reset of expectations as far as what a decentralized system really is. It's so easy to compare Steem to Facebook or Twitter or some other centralized social media platform. It's fundamentally different. And it's actually one of the most amazing accomplishments that we've had in the blockchain space, to have an application that people could actually confuse with a centralized system. That's pretty cool, but it creates problems when expectations are set in such a way. I mean, anyone who's been doing software development for any number of time just goes, well, why can't we just revert? Why can't we just change the database, change the schema, change the structure, whatever, go back to old code? And I brought that up in the first few minutes of this, and I kind of got laughed at by a lot of the other witnesses, but it was really just in the first few minutes, it's the only time you can even entertain the idea of reverting a hard fork. It's something that is fundamental to decentralized blockchain systems, that once you move forward on a hard fork, you have moved forward. Immutability is not to be compromised. I mean, we're talking about people's money and their funds. So this is kind of answering the big question I keep hearing, is why didn't we just revert? It was not an option. In other software systems, centralized systems, you have options like that. We didn't. So we did the best we could, but as it's been brought up, the test network, I think, was underutilized. I myself, because of my travel schedule this month, was a terrible month for me. I didn't get to it till later, and I started asking some hard questions, and it became clear. And with those hard questions, I think, to his credit, Ned responded well to say, hey, we need better criteria from the witnesses about what their standards are for whether or not they're going to upgrade. And so I published a post, Ragamuff and other people published some posts on, okay, well, yeah, here's my standards. And the challenge, I feel, is that we also, as witnesses, we need the support of all of you, the token holders and community, to make those hard stances. If we say, okay, look, we're not going to upgrade because our criteria has not been met, that's a difficult thing to do as a witness, because it looks like you're not updating your servers. That's one of the most obvious signals you can send to the network of, oh, look at me, I upgraded really quickly. And everyone goes, ooh, look at them, they're really on the ball, and it's unfortunately not a good signal. right? Like, so we kind of have to say, look, I'm ready to upgrade, but then maybe I'm specifically not upgrading and for these reasons, and I need support from token holders. For example, if we wanted to push it back another couple of weeks, well, we would need some kind of confirmation that doing so would have been a positive action, that we would have found more bugs. And the only thing I can come up with right now, just as I've been doing my own retrospective on how things went down, is that the test net, it had zero account creation fee. It had different times based on different things. The way Tin Man and Porter, these different tools, filled it, kind of made the resource credit system a little wonky, so it wasn't directly relatable to production. There were some challenges with it, but I don't think we knew those challenges because not enough people spent the time that we had using it. I know Tim did, I know others did. So that's one thing I've been thinking about. Is like, until we can really know that things are solid on the testnet, we probably really shouldn't move forward. And I'm glad we have a testnet now. That's a huge improvement. We didn't even have one prior to that. So that's kind of, I think, the things that we can move forward with is making sure that we have enough witnesses using the testnet so we can feel confident, and then hopefully having support from the token holders to say, look, I know we want these awesome new features. I know we want these changes. It's been a year, for example, with Hard Fork 20. We want to move forward, but are you willing to support us if we say no because we haven't had our criteria met? And I think that's something we're going to have to explore as a community going forward. I got a number of other questions that we can get to later, but I mean, if you want, I could touch on them now and as food for thought. But this is kind of my opening thoughts.
Yeah, let's stick with opening thoughts, and then we'll open this up to either a little bit of discussion first, and then some questions, or just straight into questions. We'll kind of see where it goes. But I invited Fairzim on too. So Fairzim, can you unmute yourself? Or let's see if I muted you. No, you would have to unmute yourself and then speak. Fairzim.
Yeah,
there we
that
go.
was quick. Thanks. A bit unexpected quick. Damn, now I lost the line. The testnet I agree with Luke, it's great that we have one, but in my perception, it wouldn't have changed much if more people would have tested this, because the testnet did not simulate the hard fork. So what we need there is that Steemit provides us with a testnet that really runs parallel in the old version and goes through the same hard fork that the live network will go. It's the only way to really simulate the hard fork. Yeah, it's hard to talk while walking, harder than I expected. I will have a break.
Okay. Tim, do you want to share something? Or give us an opening thought?
Sure. Got a few things to say. I'll try to go relatively quickly. So part of this, I think I'll take some of the heat here for some negativity, and I'll throw out a slightly different view, which is I still actually think Hard Fork 20 went relatively well. Let me clarify that with, obviously there were some pretty major issues. Obviously the user experience over the past week has been extremely horrible. But in the grand scheme of things, the blockchain successfully forked. We've been producing blocks under the new chain. I'll knock on wood, but there's a whole lot of other things that could have gone much more wrong than they actually did. I mean, we could have had divergent chains. We could have had consensus data being corrupted. I mean, I would say we're not completely out of the woods yet, and that it still might take some time for things to play out. But at least so far, the problems that have come up have been solvable problems, things that the development team have been able to patch, and they've been doing an amazing job getting patches rolled out as quickly as they possibly can, and the witness and development community has also been doing an awesome job getting those patches rolled out to the live systems. So I think part of this is that we need to work a little bit on the expectations of users. Obviously, the platform going down for a week is extremely bad. No one is trying to say that it's not. But at the same time, we're dealing with new technology here that has never been used in this way, and when we evolve, there's going to be some growing pains, and I think that users should understand that stuff like this can happen when you're dealing with complex software. Things can go wrong. software doesn't always work correctly the first time that it's used, and so the patches are often needed. As was already mentioned by you, Agrode, and I think even a few others, one of the big challenges with the fact that we're working with blockchain technology is that patch rollout is extremely slow. So even if the development team can get a patch out in 1 to 2 hours, if that patch requires a replay, then that could take up to a day for the witnesses to get up on their nodes. It could take 2 to 3 days for the RPC nodes, and so it sucks for the user experience. But that's the technology that we're working with here. Is that when a fix is needed, it does take time to roll out, and so I think people are just going to need to understand that some patience is needed, and that when there's a glitch or a bug or something's not working, we're obviously working very hard to fix it, but it's just going to take some time. There's a lot that's been said on trying to prevent these types of things. I agree with the sentiment that there's obviously a lot of things that we can do better going forward. I think for the next main hard fork, which is supposed to be SMTs, there's a lot of things that witnesses and myself, including myself, are planning to do to try to prevent these types of things as much as we can. Again, I want to stress the fact that there's really no way that we're going to guarantee with 100% certainty that the software is going to roll out bug-free. There's thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of lines of code that are involved with this, and with the complexity that's involved, all we can do is our best. And so I think, again, the expectations need to be that it's possible that when these things roll out, that it could be initially bumpy. So as far as going forward, I think one of the main things that myself and a lot of witnesses are kind of talking about and thinking about, and probably will be posting on soon, is, as Luke mentioned, kind of a formalized set of testing and review policies for what are their criteria for accepting hard forks. I think it is important for witnesses to have standards and let people know what those standards are. And then if their standards are not met, that they don't accept hard forks. But at the same time, we need to do this in a pragmatic way. We can't just, stand in the way because we don't like the way something specific is being done. There needs to be a pragmatic way of working between the developers and the witnesses where we can hopefully come up with the best product, and not basically, put out a list of 1,000 demands, and if those 1,000 demands aren't met, we're never going to allow any new hard forks to occur. And I also think that, we need to do a very good job as witnesses of letting the dev team know early if there is an issue. We're supposed to have around 3 months for testing the SMT hard fork, and so, if witnesses and users can identify serious glitches in the early time period of that gives the development team time to find and fix those issues. And if it takes longer to fix those issues, then that release date might need to be pushed back. But I don't think that it's fair for if we were to end up in a situation where we've had 3 months to test, and 3 days before the hard fork is about to happen, witnesses start throwing up a huge list of objections to the hard fork. I think those objections need to be found early so that we have time to work through them, and hopefully the result of this can be a lot more positive experience as far as everybody being able to identify problems early so that we can get them fixed as soon as possible.
Matt?
Hey, thanks. I just want to first say something that Taskmaster mentioned in chat a little bit ago, is that the actual changes in this hard fork, should they all be working correctly and as planned, are really extremely good, I think, and important for the future of the blockchain. And I think that point has gotten completely overshadowed by the events of the past week. And I hope that most of the people, at least in this chat, know that. But I hope we can also spread the word to everyone else who might not really understand what these changes are and just see them as, breaking everything, potentially. So, and one thing especially is also that the resource credit system, which is really at the heart of all these issues, limiting usage of the blockchain is not something new. Obviously, there was the bandwidth system in place before the resource credit system that did the exact same thing. It limited how much you could use the blockchain based on your Steem power. The thing is that most people, including brand new users, never ran into that and were probably not even aware of it. So I think it's important that people really understand, even new users, and it's really, I guess, a messaging and user interface thing, but that they really understand that the usage of the blockchain is limited, and being able to use it is sort of like a privilege, and it's something that's important, and it's different in a good way, I think, than Facebook or Reddit or any other system where there's just kind of unlimited usage. Anyone can just go post as much and whatever stuff that they want. I mean, unless the company blocks them or bans them. But the blockchain has limited resources, and you kind of need to pay for the privilege of using those resources. And I think that if it was made much more clear through the user interfaces that was the case, I think it would make things like this be a lot easier if people understood that. And I think it would also be good for the Steem blockchain in that, like, people really feel like they do have this privilege of using the limited resources of this blockchain, and that's what getting and holding Steem power gives you. So that's my opinion on this. I know obviously there are a lot of issues with how the resource credit system was implemented initially, but overall it's a very good thing in that it will make it easier for people to see and understand how much usage they get on this blockchain based on their investment in Steem power. So that's I just wanted to say that as my opinion on that particular topic. And then as far as how we can do better in the future, so one of the biggest issues for me was that this was the first hard fork I've been involved in since even ever hearing about Steem. It's been a year and a half, I guess, or so since the last hard fork. And I think that in itself led to a lot of the problems. Like, I didn't know what to do. I'd never been through a hard fork. And I think, a lot of other witnesses, even some of the top 20 witnesses, had never actually been through a hard fork. Even if they were on the platform, they may not have been witnesses or top witnesses at that time. So I kind of hope that the next hard fork happens before SMTs. I hope we just have some small hard forks that tweak some things, every once in a while. So it's more of a regular event that everyone's, familiar with. We all know what to do. We all know what to test. It's not like, everyone's just trying to figure this out for the first time for this humongous hard fork with, hundreds of different code changes, which, I feel like will be the case again when we get to SMTs. So I would love if there were a few smaller hard forks in between now and early next year. And I'm guessing that probably won't happen, just because, it might delay SMT development a bit. But that's what I'd like to see. Like, the more often we do it, the more comfortable everyone will get with it. And I expect that, problems like this will happen less often.
Yeah, so Anjarki brought up the point that every time we do a hard fork, exchanges go down. So I think, look, I love the idea that we do it more frequently than a year or a year and a half. Certainly having, like, teams that are ready and experienced, and there's more of them. There's lots of good parts about that, but I think that it's also nice to be able to cash out Steem into US dollars, or be able to purchase US dollars to purchase my Steem. The exchanges, I think, are a critical part of this.
Yeah, I think if we work with I don't think we should say, we shouldn't do hard forks because exchanges may go down. I think then in that case we should work on making it a very easy process and working with the exchanges and giving them enough time, so that they can have limited, if not zero, downtime when we do hard forks.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't advocate don't do hard forks. I just think, like, I'm trying to figure out what would be a better schedule, and the fastest I was really feeling comfortable with is something like quarterly.
Okay, quarterly is fine. Then we could potentially have two other hard forks before, SMTs.
Yeah, I don't know if that gets planned like right now. There's not a lot that I would like advocate. This is what needs to go in right this second. But I guess I'm saying in theory that getting them slightly more frequent would be good. Getting them less jam packed would be good. And but I don't think that we can do like hell. We've just done 5 soft forks and. I'm kind of exhausted from staring at my computer screen and babysitting replays. So it'd be nice to not do this, once a month, but somewhere around once a quarter or so, maybe once every 6 months. Then somewhere in there is a good balance of growing the chain.
I agree with that, and I would expect that every 3 to 6 months there will be something that comes up that we'll want to change. Just a guess.
Okay, so I think that's a pretty good start. So, and actually I was about to ask, are there questions? And then Luke Stokes just posted a bunch. So some of the questions for discussion I was thinking of, will this become a pay-to-play system? So let's start with that, because I got some questions in here, and I'll start answering these questions as I see them to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I just, one of my number one concerns I hear over and over again is people obviously concerned about the minnows, people that are just showing up and they don't have, 2 years of experience. They don't have the education about blockchains and cryptocurrency. This is kind of the gateway drug to cryptocurrency. They're coming in and going, oh, hey, an application I can just use. And then later they find out that it's based on some world-changing, amazing technology that's decentralized and awesome. So the immediate concern is like, well, wait, now they have to pay money to use this platform. And I think that can have some immediate negative connotations with stuff they've experienced in the past. And so I think it's important for us to get out in front of these kind of storylines and saying, okay, instead of it being that, maybe we should, and this kind of bleeds into the other question too about freemium model, like how do we talk about the story of Steem? And then also Steam Peak, Busy.org, like all these other applications that are on top of Steam in a way that is fun and interesting. Like I don't get mad when I download a game and they tell me right away how much mana I have to use in the game. If the game is fun, then I enjoy the amount like Candy Crush gives me 5 lives, and that's it. And then I have to wait for those lives to regenerate unless I want to spend money. Candy Crush is a very successful game and everybody loves playing it. They don't get mad that they only have 5 lives. It's just that expectation was created well. So I kind of see it as a similar type of thing. If we can get in front of this narrative and set expectations correctly to say, look, you're on a blockchain. Nothing on a blockchain can ever be free, and we'll explain why that is. And then moving forward, what are we going to do with that? And then we can set up, hopefully, an environment that is interesting, fun, engaging, and is open to everyone. And really, hopefully, some form of meritocracy where if you do something valuable, the community pays you and rewards you, and it's worth your time. And I'd love to have more feedback from other people about this like pay-to-play concern, because I do feel when I hear a lot of angry people, I feel like they have expectations that just aren't matching with a decentralized blockchain. And I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
Anybody want to answer what they think about limitations? Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to say something. I'll just chime in. Luke makes a lot of great points. It makes me think of kind of 2 things that I want to highlight, which is that, and in my opinion, Luke is exactly right about everything. The first point is that a lot of people are talking about making the assumption that, okay, this is what I'm able to do at the very beginning, and assuming that I don't earn any more SP with my activities, then that will not be nearly enough to be able to interact on a social network. And going back to Luke's point, like this is an expensive platform to run. And really, when people are first joining, what we should be trying to help them understand is that, you should be using your first interactions incredibly wisely so that you can accumulate Steem power as fast as you can, so that you can, and if you do that, if you use your comments wisely and if you post wisely, then you will quickly earn enough SP to do like plenty, right? Because all you have to do, to quadruple the amount of stuff you can do is go from 15 SP to, oh god, I'm embarrassing myself with my poor math skills, but whatever, like 70 or so SP. So I think that's one important thing for people to bear in mind, that, yes, you're limited at first. We don't know how limited you're going to be. But then the second thing I wanted to mention is that, we are trying to make this blockchain as valuable as possible. And so what that means is that what is hosted on it has to be valuable. And so the trick here is trying to design a system that motivates people to focus on value creation. And like back when Steem first started, and Steemit.com first launched, that was a big part of the ethos, which is that this is about creating value. And this is a different type of social network where people add value and get rewarded for that value. And I think it really reflects the issues with the bandwidth system, that it organically migrated away from that and towards something where people felt like you can post whatever crap you want. And so right now what we're dealing with is this difficult transition that we made worse by poor testing, which led in too many bugs. So that's all. That's the point I wanted to make about that. It's just really, extending what Luke said.
I would like to answer to the paid.
Go for it, Fearsome. Fearsome, you're not. I can't hear you. Fearsome, one last try, and then I'm moving on. All right, he wants to go respond to pay to play. Maybe you can type that up instead. All right, so actually number 2. So I have a handful of questions that Luke just wrote. I'm going to go into the next one. The next question is, what are the expectations?
Sorry, could I jump in?
Oh, go for it, Tim.
Sorry, I thought we were kind of going down the line, so I was waiting. So Andarchy said it extremely well, and I just want to highlight that, is that really the expectation is not that users starting out are never going to be able to do the type of activity that they want, but it's basically we need to define a realistic starting point of how much activity they should need to get started, and then let them earn the ability to do more by contributing and earning more Steem power. I want to clarify a couple things though, which is that while that's the model, I think the way that it was implemented and rolled out with Hard Fork 20 was extremely bad as far as achieving that goal. The way it needs to work is just like what Luke was saying. It needs to be a game. I mean, users basically need to enjoy the process of working their way up, and I get to do 5 posts now a week or a day or whatever it is. And so some of the key things that I think are needed in order for this to be done properly is we need a rollout that doesn't go horribly bad and create a whole bunch of other chaos. I also think that we need to have the right expectations. I think users going from what they're currently used to today to all of a sudden going to being able to transact significantly less without any explanation or any tools to show them, how they can do better or anything like that is just very bad. So the UI, user interface presentation of the data, is a really key element of this, where it needs to be turned into a fun game where users understand the game, they understand that they can do things to make their experience better, and it should be fun. for them to be leveling up in the game and acquiring more abilities as they continue to progress.
Fearsome, you want to try again? You're just clicking in and out, bud. I'm going to keep moving on for now.
Can I just jump in real quick on the pay-to-play thing?
Go for it, Matt.
I also would say it's definitely not pay-to-play. I would call it more invest-to-play. And there's a big difference there, because in a traditional pay-to-play game, I mean, you're literally just paying your money. You're not investing in anything. You don't get that money back. It's just a, an entertainment way to kill time type of thing. But here, that's not the case. You're not paying money. You're investing in Steem power specifically, and that is a big difference. So I think also if we can have people understand that, like, their money's not just going away to some company that now has more money and pays their executives more. They're investing in an asset, which I don't know the future of that asset. Neither does anybody, but it has the potential to also be worth a lot more in the future. And in addition to you investing in this asset, you now also get the ability or privilege, like I said before, of participating on the Steem blockchain. So it's better than an investment in, in gold or in a stock or in Bitcoin, in my opinion, because you can actually use that investment. So, and it also has the ability to raise in value.
It seems like that was a well-received point. The next question that he's got here, what are the expectations of this freemium model? And actually, that's one of the things that I've been poking around with, trying to go get at, of like, what is the base case of what we think a brand new account ought to be able to do, and then trying to figure out in a sustainable way, what does that mean? We now have resource credits, so we now have like a budgeting system. Let's go figure out our cost, and then we can start figuring out like how much can we budget in a sustainable way so that the chain keeps moving, and it's not, we're not overfilling tickets, we're not, letting everybody spam, but some people are allowed to comment. Like, we now actually have, with Hard Fork 20, a much better, we have ways that we can tweak the system other than, we have a bandwidth number and that's it, or we have Steem power and that's it. Now we have a lot more like dials that we can mess around with. So part of that, I've been trying to figure out, at least for myself, what is it that we want Minnow to be able to do. And my minimum expectation is something like, every single day, if a minnow wants to grow here, they have to be able to put out 1 or 2 posts, maybe as many as 4 posts in a day. We want them to be able to comment, which costs as much as posting. And I would imagine that you got to get 5 or 6 comments in so that you can start growing your influence here, because especially for minnows trying to grow, commenting is one of the most important things that they can do. And then that gets us to transactions and voting. So, the system's set up so you get 10 votes per day, so we sure as hell better budget that in. And then I think people want to be able to transact on here, if nothing else, to be able to go get some experience transacting on this thing. But especially as dApps keep coming along, you might not be here to go post and make friends. You might be here to go partake in some sort of app or one of the businesses that starts popping up here. So you're going to need some transactions too. So that's where my brain's gotten to, in terms of what are the expectations of the freemium model. At least 10 votes, at least 10, maybe 20 transactions, and I'm imagining between posts and comments somewhere between 5 and 10 per day. And so that would be my initial starting budget or starting plan. And then, of course, just because we'd say it would be nice if we have this, the next question would be, does the blockchain support that? Do we have enough resources? Do we have enough? Do we have the ability to support the things that I just mentioned? And then that would be the next question to follow up of, what's the user experience that we want? And then, do we have a budget that allows us to get there? So this question is, what are the expectations of this freemium model? And I sort of expanded it to, how do we design a good freemium model? And I'd welcome anybody else on the panel to sort of answer this.
I'm actually driving at the moment, but I think it's a great question. In that, like, the witnesses really pay a lot of this, right? Ideally, like they're the ones that have to burden the cost of upgrading to more powerful servers and potentially even experimental technology for high speed hard drives and things like that. We have some hard limitations of what's physically possible, but at the same time, there are other options. There might be a way, for example, that we can, there's been talks of truncating the blockchain in such a way where you take a hash and you put stuff in a traditional kind of like MongoDB, and each witness runs that same DB, and there's some level of consensus that's enforced via hashes to ensure that data hasn't been tampered with. But it still exists. It's just not in the same format, so it's more easily accessible. There's different things we have to explore if we run into hard costs, because we're not going to just abandon the experiment, right? If we go, here's what we want as a user experiment, but it's not possible with the tech.
Luke, I think we lost you, bud. Opening it up again. Anybody want to go talk about the freemium model and sort of user expectations within it?
Well, I'll say a couple things. I don't want to get too repetitive as far as things I've already said, but I think the general consensus, we can debate and discuss particulars, but the general consensus is that we want users to start out with a positive user experience. I think we can start with that as an agreeable point that we can all come to consensus on, and then we can start talking about, okay, well, what is a reasonable starting user experience? And I think a huge responsibility of that is going to fall on the user interfaces. 3 posts per day with the current UI is extremely different than 3 posts per day with a UI that basically has a tutorial built in, lets users know how many posts they have left, encourages them to use them wisely, lets them know that they'll get 3 more in another day. So, before we can start talking about the specifics of, okay, well, what is the right number of posts and comments and upvotes and etc., I do think that the conversation about the UI layer needs to happen first, because without the UI, it's going to result in negative user experience. The other thing I want to point out too, as far as I don't think there's too strong of a voice of people basically saying that users should be able to do whatever they want, or hundreds of posts a day or anything like that. But I do want to put it into perspective too, that users were very frustrated with the fact that it took almost 2 days for a patch to get rolled out to fix this issue. And the reason that it took that long is because of all of the data that's stored in the blockchain. And so if we don't come up with a pragmatic way to limit the amount of data in the blockchain, then if we look forward 3-5 years from now, could you imagine if it would take a month and a half to roll out a patch, because that's how long it would take to resync the blockchain? If we get 100 or 1,000 times as many users and we just let them do as much posting and as much voting as they want, the blockchain is going to grow, and it's a lot more significant than just, the witnesses are going to have to pay more to maintain their servers. We get paid, we can deal with more expensive servers, but there's a hard limit on what the current computing power can do. And if the blockchain is 1,000 times bigger than it is today, then that's a lot longer that it's going to take to resync the blockchain. And we can get into discussions on, well, let's figure out how to get the blockchain to sync faster, which is fine. But the point is that I'm hoping we can all also come to an agreement that we do need to come up with some reasonable constraints to prevent the blockchain from growing too much to the point where working with the system and patching and rolling out updates doesn't become unusable as well.
Yeah. I want to interrupt for a second. There was a question from Surfer Marley. Is it planned to display resource credits, MonaVP, etc. on Steemit.com anytime soon? In Turkey, is the conversation in the Steemit headquarters, are they talking about trying to give more information to users through Condenser and through the Steemit.com web portal, or is it, or are you guys really stuck in like, hey, let's make sure that HF20 is just functioning properly? Like, where's Steemin at in terms of like what their next set of priorities is, or like what do you have a sense of what their like kind of next week or two, or maybe even next month or two priorities are?
Yeah, I think the vast majority of resources within the organization are being allocated toward ensuring that, you know, consensus level changes, including future changes, and I think our general perspective is that I mean, right now we're just so focused on everything that's happening now. I just think we're not even thinking about this stuff. You know, there's so many web interfaces for Steam, and there's stuff like Steem Plus and Steam Peak. You know, there's so many people out there who can solve these questions and solve these issues, whereas there's so few people out there who can solve the questions that we're solving. You know, if you look at how many PRs have been submitted to you know, the Steam repo over the last year from outside of Steemit, you know, we really need to focus on what we're good at, and maybe we need to focus more on helping other people get good at this stuff too. Helping, you know, maybe it's our fault there aren't as many Steem PRs. So, you know, I think we're gaining we're becoming much more self-aware about what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are, and, you know, and what consumes a disproportionate amount of resources. And so, you know, are we great at educating users, you know, through user interface and stuff? You know, I don't think we're so great at that. And we've got plenty on our plate right now, but I think that, you know, that's a great place for other user interfaces to come in and fill that gap, as well as user-led initiatives for educating people. You know, we've got a ton on our plate, and I think we're not very good at stuff at some things. Then, you know, a next logical question is, well, do you think we should be spending more time on the stuff we're good at, or more time on the stuff we're bad at?
Okay.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Let's go with Matt, and I think I hear Fairzam. So let's go with Matt first, and then Fairzam can follow up.
Yeah, so I mean, Andrew, I agree that, you know, your core blockchain developers should be focusing on developing the core blockchain and definitely not focusing on Steemit.com. And I hear the Steemit, you know, stance of let the community and other third-party developers make websites and tools to do all this stuff. But I think the reality is that, you know, Steemit.com is the face of Steam for the vast majority of, you know, users in the world. It's got the highest rankings. It's what comes up first in Google searches. So, I mean, that is the face. Most people don't even know the difference between Steemit and Steam, because they what they see on Steemit.com is what they think of the Steam blockchain in general. And I think it's only going to hurt us to continue to not assume that's the case. So, I mean, if I were Steemit.com, I would try to hire a separate team, you know, a website UI gamification design team, separate from the existing core developers, because I agree those are few and far between and should work on the core blockchain. But, you know, I would get a really good team of people to design an awesome Steemit.com. I just think it's going to be making it harder for everyone who's a stakeholder in this blockchain if we continue with the Steemit.com just being some proof of concept and looking to others to create better interfaces, because the other people who create better interfaces just don't have, you know, 1/100th of the resources that Steemit.com subject.
Yeah, actually, I mean, you make good points, and I just want to say that I want to make one point, which is that maybe another option is that it's actually, you know, it's a lot easier to submit PRs for condenser. There's a lot more people with those skill sets. You know, while the whole fiasco was undergoing, Luke Stokes actually contributed a PR. And, you know, maybe that's another thing is that, and you guys can always exert this pressure on us too, where it's like, you know, if, you know, let your feelings be known. Like if you guys think this, or if we're not approving PRs fast enough, you know, exert that pressure. And then with respect to hiring that other team, and you know, if this is something that the community really wants us to do, and the witnesses really want us to do, you know, hammer it home, and we'll have to take it into consideration. I mean, we are working on some stuff, and I can't comment on everything that we're working on, but I do think that there are valid points that Matt just made.
Fearsome, one more shot at trying to communicate from your phone here.
Yeah, that's a test. Can you hear me?
I can hear you this time.
Wonderful. I think all these, starting from the discussion about the user experience for minnows, and also this topic is all working on things that in the long run will be very different when the laid out plans work. So we're breaking our heads a lot over the current situation, and we all know that the current situation won't be forever. So when the blockchain scales, when we get millions of users, when we have 1 billion users, do we still want everyone to have the ability for 10 comments every day? Maybe it depends on the business models that prove successful in that time. If there is now, to compare it to current tools, if there is a Twitter thing, sure, people want to post 10 times a day. If it is a Reddit thing, the majority of Reddit users are readers. And if you have to say something, it may very well be possible that if you want to say something regularly and get known in the community, that you will need to invest or find someone, an investor who supports you. It's not going to get easier in the future. And that's the same with all cryptocurrencies. In the beginning, you could mine Bitcoin on your PC and earn full Bitcoins, full blocks with your CPU. That's not possible anymore because the thing has grown. More people want it, demand has grown, and it will be more difficult to earn. It will be more difficult to do something on Steem. We shouldn't talk around that.
So I have 2 more questions from Luke, and then I want to kind of I want to get more folks asking questions, but don't do it just yet because my brain isn't ready for that. It's noon. We have about 1 more hour left of this. I have 2 more questions from Luke, and then I'd really like to try to ask the audience to go hit us up with some questions. So maybe you guys can prepare some.
Yeah, and we don't have to go through all mine. Those are just some ideas I threw out there. Just
No, I mean it's good. My response to what do we do is let's go crowdsource. What do we do? So let's. I think it's I'm happy to go through these questions, and then I'm happy to add more to them. There's been a call for more structured witness testing requirements, but do we have the support of token holders to not move forward if our criteria isn't met? Will we be voted out for appearing like we didn't respond quickly enough to upgrade? I mean, that doesn't quite feel like a concern. That feels more like a witness discussion than than something that directly impacts all of our users. But I guess it is a good question of like, hey, if we don't support this and we stand our ground, does it look like we just didn't upgrade? Does it look like, we're not participating, or does it look like we're objecting? And so, trying to figure out how to be a good witness isn't as simple as run the box. It begs that question of, how do we put our foot down? When do we put our foot down? When do we say, well, we're not entirely sure it's ready, but it seems like Steam it's confident. Like where do we find the balance of some combination of rigorous testing, some combination of time limits. How do we present our answers? I mean, I think that's why we have 20 different witnesses that are up here that are very different and take a different approach, because I don't think there's one. But I'll open this up to others. There has been a call for more structured witness testing requirements, but what do we do? But do we have the support of token holders not to move forward if our criteria isn't met? Will we be voted out for appearing like we didn't respond quickly enough to an upgrade? So that's a question. Anybody want to tackle it?
I can take it.
Go for it, Tim.
I'd say the short answer is that it should not be a concern if it's handled properly. The key part being communication. I think if witnesses communicate upfront what their standards are, let people know that if their standards are not met, that they will not be voting for the hard fork. And if their standards are not met, be very loud and vocal about the fact that this is not done yet. I am not voting for the hard fork until this is done. And, when it comes time for hard fork time, then, I think at that point the witness should be fairly safe. But at the same time, for a top witness, I think that the general consensus among the witness community is that even if you don't support the hard fork, that you should have a node running the hard fork code, so that if the hard fork occurs and you were in the minority and you didn't support the hard fork, that you still join the consensus afterwards. I mean, it's a personal choice. If you're that against the hard fork and you decide, well, I'm not going to join the consensus, then you can, basically drop off the witness consensus going forward. But I think, in most cases, if a witness doesn't support the hard fork, but they, plan to upgrade if there is a supermajority right after the fork, that's a way to handle it where they won't appear that they're, missing blocks or whatnot because they're not on the latest version.
Anyone else want to chime in before I move on to Luke's last question here?
Yeah, if I could just add a little quick comment, it really is important that the token holders get involved in the process. I do a monthly kind of witness engagement report. I'm actually a few days late on getting this month's out because of all the drama, but just your tokens matter, your votes matter, because you are what enables a witness to define the consensus that is the blockchain we all enjoy. Your votes matter.
All right, so last up, emergency situations make it difficult because you are expected to move forward quickly with upgrades. In a sense, your choice is taken away. That's not really a question. I do think that, I guess maybe this is, how do you guys have thought processes on how to handle emergency situations where, patches are deployed quickly and expected to be put into production quickly?
Well, I disagree with the syntax that there's no choice. I mean, there's always a choice, and even in these high speed patch situations, there's a lot of witnesses that will go back and forth with the dev team and ask questions and do a code review before applying it to their nodes. So I think, it's important to go quickly, but at the same time, it's important not to go too quickly. And that if there's a patch that you're not comfortable with, that you take the time to become comfortable with it before you apply it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think everyone needs to be doing code review, or especially a top 20 witness, and if you can't do it yourself, hopefully hire or incentivize someone on your team to be able to do it. It's critically important.
The other thing I'm going to add too, which is a little bit of a tangent, but a lot of the code that everyone is talking about, we have, so little time to review, has been coming in issues and pull requests over a longer time period. Even with the patches that have come out, most of the patches that have come out over the past few days, there have been issues ahead of time, and then there have been pull requests ahead of time. And if witnesses are keeping up to date with the GitHub repository, they can be giving themselves extra time to review things as opposed to waiting until the release is tagged to start looking at it. Personally, as a witness, I have notifications for the Steem GitHub repository turned on. So basically, every time there's a new issue, every time there's a new pull request, I get an email about it. And I'm keeping up with those emails multiple times per day so that, as code is being checked in, as changes are being discussed, I'm trying as much as possible to keep up with those discussions and keep up with the changes so that when they finally are packaged in a release, I'm not set with, 100 changes that I all of a sudden have to review all at once.
Hearing no other... Are there other responses? I'm happy to open this up for a second longer. Let's try to do this. I'd like to open this up to the audience for some questions. And if you feel strongly and you really want to come on air, we can help make that happen too. But for now, if there are audience members that want to go ask a question either to the panel or to any person in particular or just general, I'd welcome some questions. So here's one from Jarvie. You talked about educating and informing expectations for users. This does not seem to be something blockchain and software can actually solve. As the voice for the community, I'd like the witnesses to talk about how they'd like this to happen, even down. Talk about how they'd like this to happen, even down to how to show RC or whatever else helps to do these theories you talked about earlier. I believe a lot of these things are solved by front ends. Any of them can and should be doing this. So, audience question, you talked about educating and informing expectations for users. How do we do it?
Well, I'll just make a quick point here, which is that this could be a business in and of itself. This could be a front end in and of itself. Every problem is an opportunity here. So, but somebody else wanted to speak, so I'll shut up now.
Oh, I was just going to make a quick comment that I've kind of tried to do this a little bit with the whole understandingblockchainfreedom.com kind of project, and I completely agree. This is an education thing. This is just something where we have to help people understand this new paradigm of decentralized systems and what the expectations that go along with it. And anyone can do that, and anyone can be rewarded for doing that.
Yeah, the one thought I have on the UI stuff, this gets a little nerdy, but if you guys have been looking at like Steemed, STEEMD.com has put up already some ways to go view resource credits and estimate costs of things and how much of it you have on your account. They've done a nice job. But the challenge is that the resource credits themselves are literally in the 40 quadrillion, depending on how much Steam power you have. I'm sure even larger accounts are beyond that. So one of the thoughts that I had is that there are ways that we could literally just divide by a billion. Start just by dividing by a billion on the UI, so that instead of saying you have 43 quadrillion, maybe you have 120 resource units that are each themselves worth an enormous number. I'm just trying to make it so that the number is easier to read, so that I'm not sitting here dividing 43 quadrillion by 22,000 to go figure out how much of this do I get per Steam or something. That's really quite difficult. It's not difficult, it's just inconvenient, hard to see. It's when you get to that many numbers, it's hard to know, or are we in the billions, trillions, quadrillions? So just in terms of one of the things that I think some user interfaces could do is create a term called resource units, and basically just take whatever is the cheapest transaction, which I think right now is actually like a transfer, like a 0.001 SBD transfer, and go divide by that. Because then what you do is you get this really nice, all the numbers then are well, how many transfers could I do? I got enough power to do 1,200 of them, or 1,500 of them. Or how many comments is this? Now you're talking in terms of comments and transactions, as opposed to how many quadrillions of resource credits do I have?
Yeah, can I jump in on that?
Go for it.
So I think, like I mentioned in my response to Androarchy before, I really think there should be like a team of like, that would develop a great website to build a Steemit.com. And what you just said is something that I think any, top-notch user interface designer would key on immediately. Like, you don't want to show users numbers in quadrillions because it's just too hard to wrap your head around. And I think, like I said before, whether we like it or not, people use Steemit.com. Most of the users don't use Steam Plus. They don't use SteamD.com. The ones that do are already the power users for the most part. They're the ones who, aren't the most important to target, which are the brand new users. So, my answer to the question is, I think like literally whether it's Steemit Inc. that does it or somehow the Steem blockchain funds it, but to go and hire some people who can build just a top-notch gamified website. I just think that would do so many wonders for Steem, and it has to be Steemit.com. I don't like that, but I acknowledge that that's the case. I mean, we could go build the most awesome other website we want, but the reality is that most people will use Steemit.com.
But does that current state really matter? What's the business model of Steemit.com? Where does Steemit.com give Steem value? Steemit.com is a prototype. The business models still have to be found. That's why SMT have been introduced, because they realized nobody's using Steem for those business models. And sinking money in Steemit.com to make the current users who are not profitable for the blockchain more happy is sunken cost.
No, I totally disagree with that. You said the current users are not profitable for the blockchain. I feel that the more users we have using the blockchain, even if they don't invest in Steem themselves, gives Steem, the token, more value for everybody else. So I want as many people as possible to be using Steem, and the way it is right now is
statistics don't give that data. The price, the user base followed the price, not the other way around.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the price of cryptocurrencies right now is not really based on anything other than speculation. I'm kind of looking to more long term, where long term, the more people that use a platform.
Yeah, but what is the long term business model of Steemit? There is none. There is no income. There is nothing where Steemit would give Steem a use.
Well, I don't follow that, because Steemit.com gives Steem the same use that it has anywhere else. It is a decentralized platform for posting content, and it has many other uses on top of that. So the value of Steem is being able to use that network, that decentralized platform.
Yeah, but it doesn't need Steemit for that. And
it doesn't
Steemit
need
does not
Steemit
generate
for that.
revenue. And letting people post content is not a value in itself.
Sure it is. Yeah, the more content that we have on the platform, the more other people will be interested in being involved in the platform. The value of the content is extremely valuable to the platform.
That's why we have all this.
The more people there are, then the more. That's what gives websites value. Really, the more people that use them, that read them, that interact with them.
Yeah, because websites use ads.
Well, it doesn't matter. The reason they use ads is because they're the people in the world. It's valuable to get your message out in front of a large audience. So whether that's through advertising or whatever it is.
That's the business model for websites. You cannot compare Steemit with a website running ads. Steemit does not have a business model. So what we need are more apps and spreading it, and not focusing on Steemit, which cannot provide value.
I disagree with that. I think that the advertising model is not any different than the business model on Steem. And I agree we need more apps, but
let me put it in a different perspective. Like to kind of hype aggro a little bit, Steem Monsters, I think, is an amazing example of a real, revenue generating application that was built on the Steem blockchain, and it's done very well. And I think that supporting application developers to build 10 or 100 more Steem Monster type things is a much, much better use of the resources available to the ecosystem for everyone to increase the value of their token. That being said, I think about expectations. People come to Steemit.com. I wrote a post about this a long time ago, that Steem is not Steemit. And that distinction is really important that we continually make, because it was said earlier, and it's exactly true. People think of the Steem blockchain because of the way they interact with Steemit.com. And that, I think, is just an education thing. We just have to help people break away from that. And I think SteamPeak and Busy.org and other applications are really the only long-term way that I can think we can do that, is get people to not just go to Steemit.com, but get local communities to be like, oh, we just use Busy, or we just use SteamPeak, or we just use something else. And then you can have that decentralized understanding of what's actually going on.
All right. I guess when I think about this stuff, it's like, designing the front page of a website doesn't have to be millions of dollars. We can put in $10,000, $20,000 and get something that is more readily usable. So Steemit.com, other people have been really bothered by it for a long time. I haven't been. And I think that I think it works. It does the things that I want it to do. It posts, and maybe it could be prettier, and that's true. But I think, especially with Hard Fork 20, and if we're going to go put limitations on people, exposing them to those limitations really has to be a priority. And I hope that SteamPeak and I hope Busy does it. But like Matt's saying, it's what is it? 5% of the user base. Like, people come to Steemit.com. When those other websites have put in these things and they become more attractive and more people use them, maybe it's less of a big deal. But right now, it's still 95% of our user base are going to Steemit.com. And just to go have like a little bit of, hey, here's the activity you can do. And we're not talking numbers in the quadrillions. We're talking about like, you can get 15 comments now rather than you have 63 trillion resource credits and divide that by 2.6 billion. Like, it's just too much math and too tricky. So I kind of agree with Farazim that we shouldn't be asking Steemit to go spend all their time away from blockchain development and getting away from that and doing just interface stuff. But I would also say, like, guys, there's some bare minimum that has to change now. In their defense, it's been like 4 days. So maybe it shouldn't be changed already, but this is stuff that hopefully comes along. I want to move into one of these next questions. If the idea is to have a UI that educates and if the idea is to have a UI that educates and guides users, might it make sense to have that be all that the Steemit.com UI does? Are other UIs to the point where Steemit.com can just direct people there as part of the larger education process? That's sort of fascinating. What if Steemit.com just points to other websites?
Well, the one person that would probably be in a position to comment on that is Anarchy from Steemit, so I don't think it's really anything that much of us can add too much to.
All right, I'm happy to move on. I guess some of these things are... that series of questions is really specifically about Steemit stuff, so I'll move on to the next. I want to know where the term mana came from. Is this nerdy tech speak for something or a made-up word? Was the word change tested via focus groups or posts, etc., to see if people connected with it? Voting power makes sense. It is what it says. Voting mana sounds kind of stupid, definitively confusing, and not related to what it actually is. Anybody want to give thoughts on the nomenclature?
Well, mana or mana, however you pronounce it, is pretty common in the video game industry. I always refer to Diablo 2 because that was one of my favorite games, but you kind of had your mana bar, which was the amount of potions and spells that you could cast, and every time you cast a spell it would use some up, and then it would replenish over time. So I believe that the term is basically based on that from the gaming industry.
Anybody else think it's stupid or think it makes sense?
I wonder so much how much of these things actually have to be fully explained. like for example, vests. Vests is an underlying thing that's part of the blockchain, but most people don't know about it, and nor do they care. But there are these underlying concepts like resource credits, RCs, and and I wonder if Mana will end up becoming something like that also, because what they really care about is what they can actually do. How many comments, how many posts, and if there's some kind of way to explain it into the user experience in a way they can understand, then the terms we use, whether it's mana, vest, steam power, whatever, may become less important. And I think what's more important is just, does the user understand what's going on and hasn't been displayed to them? Have we set good expectations for them up front? And it sounds like Steemit.com hasn't really done the best job of that, and I think we can improve that. So this is my call to the community. If you're a developer or a UX UI person, please get engaged and do a Utopian.io post and get paid to improve condenser. You can totally do that right now today.
Yeah, I mean, open
If
source.
the question is really how that came about, I think it has a lot to do with Roadscape using the bars on steamd.com. And someone said, "Oh, look, that looks like a health and a mana bar," and so that just stuck. And you need a name to call things in the code, and so they chose mana. It has no deeper significance.
Yeah, I do. I actually think it's a pretty good term, but I'm a lifelong gamer. For people that aren't gamers, I understand that it wouldn't make any sense to them. But if you play a video game that has mana or mana in it, you cast a spell, it goes down, and then it regenerates. And that's exactly how this works. You cast a comment, your resource credits go down, and then over time it regenerates. So it's actually it is a really nice analogy. I guess thinking that everybody understands what mana is from a gamer experience. Maybe that was an oversight, but I do think it's a really good analogy. So here's let's see. With the voting power as down as it has been across the board the last few days, but the reward pool still being created every day, how is it post-payment going to be influenced as things stabilize? That reward pool still has to be distributed, correct? That's one of the questions. Anybody want to talk about reward pool and sort of what your vote will be worth in this current model?
We're slaves to algorithms. I have no idea. I think everybody is looking forward to see what will happen.
Yeah, it's a good question, but it reminds me of a similar hard fork we had where the rewards pool just unexpectedly just got drained. And
Luke, we lost you. Yeah, I mean, right now, from what I'm seeing and whatever small tests I'm doing, that it really hasn't changed much in terms of the value of my vote. I mean, this thing, Hard Fork 20 wasn't really about like changing vote values so much as making sure that when you vote, like we're registering that that there should be a charge, basically your bandwidth to go do that. I think a lot of this stuff came about because there's a ton of spam, and that's bad. We don't just want to have like infinite amounts of spam on here, and for no other reason than like replaying the block takes forever when we have it all. But yeah, I don't think the goal has really been to curation and how we handle voting and voting power and how much you get rewarded. Inflation, those are definitely conversations, but I don't think that this is that conversation was not meant to be addressed by Hard Fork 20. So I haven't seen a lot or experienced a lot of changes other than my like voting power dropping to 0 unexpectedly. But again, that's like a one-time thing with the implementation and a hard implementation going into effect rather than, this is Steam's commitment to giving us all 0 VP forever. Like, as far as I can tell, there hasn't really been that much of a change to voting metrics. Yeah, it's not the globalists trying to take away our voting power. So here's another one. My biggest question isn't about the plan or implementation. It's more about testing. I wonder if there is thoughts towards adding users to the testnet. It feels like there needs to be larger tests, users from all VP and SP levels, those that have different commenting, little or lots a day, or upvoting and posting. So that's a general thought on the testnet. Anybody? Tim?
Yes. So that's one thing that I'll be posting about in a week or two after we kind of get the critical aspects of this behind us and we can start to, the dust settles and we have a little bit more time to think. But I think the next time around for the hard fork, one of the main things that we're going to need from everybody is a lot more testing. A lot of that burden is going to fall on the witnesses and the developers, but we will want to encourage users testing as well. So there actually was a testnet condenser, which is basically the code that runs steemit.com. I know a few people were using it, but it'll be very important for the next hard fork to give everybody information on how to use the testnet from a regular user perspective, as well as what to do if they find an issue. Basically, kind of a tutorial on how to open a GitHub issue.
And I need to state again, none of the bugs we had were findable on the testnet because we did not test the fork itself. So the whole testing structure needs to change. It needs to simulate the real as much as possible. And of course, that includes users as much as possible too. But if we found bugs now, that would be something we could have eventually found on the testnet. But there are seemingly not many new bugs. It was just the transition that was screwed.
I think related to that point, I think we didn't exercise the testnet well enough with enough witnesses. Based on my one-on-one interactions with witnesses, that I talked to, I said, hey, I just kind of got a pulse for, have you tested this and how do you feel about it? And people, had a lot of stuff going on. They tested their own applications, they tested some stuff, but ultimately, I think we didn't even get a chance to define consensus on the testnet to know if it was good enough. And I think that if we had enough people using it, we would have immediately said, hey, this is not good enough. Account creation fee is 0. So obviously it's not impacting resource credit allocation for creating accounts, and like all these different systems, like we said, we didn't test through the hard fork itself on the testnet multiple times, which we, in theory could have done. So these are things that I think engaging with the testnet more would have enabled us to even better realize that the testnet wasn't as effective as it could have been. So I think one of the steps going forward is really engaging with the testnet, getting even not just witnesses and application developers, but even everyday users to go over there. And the way, my understanding is the way Porter works, the way it ports over your content, your public key is part of that testnet as well. And you can actually log into it and interact with it. It's all not real, but you still have that ability to comment, post, upvote, resteem. These are some of the tests that I ran personally. But we could have a larger community of testers. And again, with Utopian and other different mechanisms, people could potentially get paid. We could have bounty systems to ensure that you're going to get paid for doing some valuable testing.
I just want to say that there were, I think, some bugs that were not just with the transition that could have been found on the testnet. Like the one I reported was that after delegating or powering up, it only increases your max resource credits. So you still have to wait for them to regenerate. And there was an issue with new accounts getting the wrong amount of resource credits and things like that. So there definitely were a few things that I think we should have been able to catch on the testnet. But overall, I agree, we do also need to test the actual transition.
Yeah, like on that point.
Luke, you're killing me, bud. Put your finger back on the push to talk button.
Sorry about that. I think I have a little sweaty thumb and it keeps rolling off. Sorry about that. I think on that point is we could have actually got enough witnesses involved and removed all the kind of test accounts that were there and then set our own account creation fee. We could have done that because some of the problems you mentioned, I think, were a symptom of a 0 account creation fee.
Okay, anybody else want to chime in on this? Testnet? Any other thoughts? This is, I wonder why they're not focusing on presenting the feeds in a more attractive way. If you look at most of the profiles, they're all the same. The only way you can stand out is if you have upvotes or consistent titles, meaning you're active. Otherwise, there's no differentiation between my posts. Not sure that that's all that hard fork 20 related. I guess I'll skip that for right now. Why was not testing HF20 not even front and center of Steem It's Mine? This seems like the bare minimum. Do you feel like Hard Fork 20 was front and center for testing, or do you feel like that was a missed mark here?
I would say I think it was front and center. I mean, again, we have a test net where we didn't before, but I don't think it was front and center enough. And also, too, I think there wasn't enough, in my perspective, the expectations between Steem Incorporated and their developers and the witnesses, I don't think was clarified. And then, you know, it was too late in the game. But when I started asking from the developers directly, asking tough questions of like, hey, what are your expectations? What should we be doing here? It was kind of met with, dude, you should have been doing this weeks ago. And I agree with that, but it was just never done at all, you know. So yes, it was done late, but I think now people are starting to realize that connection between communication between the actual core developers writing the code and the witnesses who are responsible for protecting the blockchain and deploying that code, that level of communication, so we can get some guidance on specific types of testing and things like that.
Other thoughts on that? And that's the last of the questions that I have in my bank. So if you guys want to go post a couple more questions, I'm happy to go take them. Here's one from Torco. I can go check this out in a second. Anybody else want to answer? Was testing HF20 front and center in their mind, or for this update?
It seems to me like there was some mis-expectations between Steemit Inc. and the witnesses. Like I said, this was my first hard fork, so I don't know how things went in the past, but it seemed like many of the witnesses had more of an expectation that, you know, Steemit Inc. does a really good amount of testing on this stuff, and it seemed like Steemit Inc. had the expectation that they made the code and it's up to the witnesses to really test this stuff. And I think that was only realized very late in the game, and there was kind of a scramble at the end to go around and start testing and, you know, figuring out even how to test. And so I think, you know, like I said, if we have more hard forks, this is not a once every 2-year thing. Hopefully that'll just be the expectations for what each person is supposed to do should be more clear and how to do it. And hopefully we can just avoid this entirely.
Yeah, I've had it in my brain that just trying to figure out what is the role of Steemit, what is the role of the witnesses, and really trying to like narrow that down and explain it a little bit better. I think that would help us, because I don't think that there's any kind of consensus or we all agree on what is Steemit's responsibility, what is ours, or and even more important, like what do they think it is, what do we think it is, what should it be? I mean, I think that that's still very much out in the open, which helped lead to this. So certainly worth exploring.
That's a really good point, in that in a decentralized system, there isn't an authority who has, you know, the rule book that just says, here's the definitions for everyone. You know, we have to find consensus off the blockchain for what these things are before we can actually enforce them on the blockchain.
Yeah, like what is the job description for witness? You know, like I know it shouldn't be exactly that, but that's sort of the comparison. And honestly, what is the mission and purpose of Steemit? Because I feel like they have a different set of expectations than we do. And one could argue, well, they're 50% stakeholders. They have 50% of all the responsibility here. But that might not be the most efficient or the best for us. And, you know, I do think a lot of us think, hey, they're the blockchain developer, and that's a great role. Where does that boundary end? Because that's where we as a community or we as a witness group, we can pick up slack that they feel like isn't their responsibility. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if it's never communicated, this is ours, or it's not, you know, we got to figure it out from there.
Well, as witnesses are the ones producing the blocks, running the blockchain, moving it forward, it is their responsibility to only deploy code they are fully confident with. That's in the job description. And basically that's it. Witnesses secure the blockchain. That means don't let code into there that could possibly harm the blockchain.
All right. Hearing no other thoughts to that, let me go put up. This is Torco's question. How do witnesses feel about making witness votes decaying or limited so that witnesses need to stay relevant and active to garner ongoing votes. It seems many of the top witnesses that have dropped out still have an incredible amount of potential power. For example, Jerry, we need a way to keep witnesses active and interactive. I actually think that that'll have the opposite effect, that if you make witness votes decay, the programmers that are the stakeholders can figure out ways to not have that affect them, and the regular users who aren't programmers will be affected by that. And so conversely, you'll have the whale stakeholder votes staying on indefinitely, the smaller votes falling off, and I think you will exasperate the problem rather than remedy it.
Yeah, so there's actually a GitHub issue for this in the Steem repository where a lot of discussion has happened. And since there's so much stuff going on for Hard Fork 20 right now, I don't know how much time I want to get into this because it's kind of a tangent discussion while still an important one to have. I would suggest any users that are interested in this conversation to go find the GitHub issue and read through the conversation that's been had there, and then if there's any additional thoughts they want to add, that they could basically put them in the GitHub issue.
This is a sort of user technical question. I still am not sure if making one short or long comment takes much more resources. I know it affects it, but does that discourage long comments versus short? Do you guys want to talk about how?
I can answer that.
Go for it.
So I don't know the exact numbers, but the way to think about it is that every time you do a post or a comment, there's overhead, and then there's also the text for the post or comment. And so what that means is if you have a post that's short versus a post that's long, the post that's long is going to cost more resource credits than the post that's short because there's more text in there. But at the same time, every time you do a post or a comment, there's that overhead charge in there as well. So, for example, if you had, let's just say 1,000 lines of text, if you put that 1,000 lines of text in one post versus you put that 1,000 lines of text in 4 posts or 4 comments, splitting it up is going to cost more resource credits because there's that additional overhead charge for each time you do a post or a comment. And then the last point is that the overhead for posts and comments is basically identical. So whether you do a post with 1,000 lines or whether you do a comment with 1,000 lines, it's essentially the same resource cost for both.
And nothing of this is meant to encourage or discourage anyone from doing whatever they want.
The chat's going a little bit wonky. Oh, it's saying they're on a different program? Damn it. Hold on. Give me 1 second, guys. Yeah, I think the radio just hard forked into a different conversation. So let me try to grab the guys in charge of that. Yeah, I think that's pretty weird. Something just moved it to a different, and we're back. All right, hey, so hopefully you guys learned everything you needed to know in the last 30 seconds. You guys made some amazing comments. Really solved everything for me. All right, just kidding there. So, you can go message me directly afterwards, and I can go tell you sort of the layout of how commenting works.
So, Agro, someone in chat asked if I could repeat what I said because I think I probably said it during the dead air time.
Go for it, Tim.
Okay, so the question is trying to understand whether doing lots of comments versus less comments is going to cost more for resource credits. So I just kind of want to explain how the underlying technology works as far as those charges. So the short answer is every time you do a post or a comment, First of all, whether it's a post or a comment does not really have an impact. They're the same cost. So if you have 1,000 lines of text and you do 1,000-line post, or you have 1,000 lines of text, same 1,000 lines, and you do 1,000-line comment, the resource cost between those two is going to be the same. So whether it's a post or a comment, it's the same resource charge. Now, if you do a post or a comment, there's the cost of the text that's inside the post or comment, but there's also an overhead charge for all the stuff that needs to happen in order to make that post or comment happen. So if you do one post with 1,000 lines of text, or you do two posts each with 500, so if you split it into two, doing it in two posts is going to cost more because there's an additional overhead charge for each one of those posts. Does that make sense?
We'll see what Unit says. Hopefully that feels like a pretty good answer. We're down to about 18 minutes. I could use maybe one or two more questions, and then I kind of want to move into just sort of some closing thoughts here and let people kind of. I guess my question would be, there's certainly been even some prominent Steemians that have said we should be rolling back. The implementation was bad, and sort of seem to think that all of this is bad. Do you guys think that we should be sticking with Hard Fork 20 and resource credits? Should we be killing these? Should we be trying to get back into bandwidth as soon as possible? How do you guys view the current situation? Are we sort of moving into the clear and this should function, or is this whole thing a terrible cluster, a terrible idea, and we should abandon it?
We have to calibrate, but right now everything seems well, I would say. And rolling back opens the doors to so many new issues that could happen on the way rolling back that it's not a good idea.
Yeah, this kind of goes to my original question of like, if we're moving towards a new model for the blockchain that cares about, resources being used, maybe pay to play isn't the right way, maybe invest to play, or, some other narrative we want to come up with is a better way to explain it. But if we've already kind of stepped into this world because we're thinking about 5 years from now with millions and millions of users, then it's kind of like, I don't know of a better option. I don't know of any other way to do this other than to say, here's the real costs, because nothing on a blockchain could be free. If there's anything on a blockchain that's free, then it will be exploited and it will destroy that chain. So we have to, make sure nothing is for free, and then we have, appropriate costs for everything. So yeah, I agree. I think it's difficult to swallow. It's a new expectation that we have to understand and wrap our heads around. It's a new change to the Steem blockchain. I mean, it really is a significant change, almost as significant as, like I said earlier in the chat, June 2016, when we started getting actual payouts. I joined July, a couple days after, when real payments were happening. And this is almost that significant. It's a major change to this blockchain. And we may lose some people for it. They may get frustrated. They may get angry. And we have to walk people through that. At the same time, we may gain millions and millions of users for many years down the road if we've positioned ourselves for growth.
That's funny to call it stamina instead of resource credits. This is just call it your health bar. Matt, did you want to say something there?
Yeah, I also wanted to say, it's kind of what I tried to mention at the very beginning, which everyone might forget at this point, but we already had a system to limit usage of the blockchain, so we're not adding anything new. It's just now more transparent, and I hope that the issues that happened over the past week, people can get past that to actually see how it's supposed to work, and that it's a net benefit. And I don't know if some people might remember, but every once in a while, when there was really high activity earlier in the year, when the Steem price was higher, there were times when new users could no longer transact based on the old bandwidth system. And at that point, there was really no way to tell when that would happen, or would they be able to transact, or how much they would be able to transact. It was just a total randomness as far as users were concerned. All of a sudden you couldn't transact and you had no idea when or if you could, or how much Steem power you would need. So really kind of the point of resource credits was to address that situation. So when it comes to the blockchain growing and getting more activity and more users, instead of this kind of, thing where you really don't know what is happening or what you can do, the resource credits, the idea is it gives you like very tangible numbers where you can see this is how much you need to do these things, and this is what I can do with what I have. So, again, the events of the past few days aside, I think going forward, it is incredibly important and will help problems, that happened once or twice in the past, where everyone all of a sudden with no understanding or reason or heads up just couldn't post or transact.
I think you have to see that we are in an evolutional system, evolving.
Evolving.
Because, an evolving system. We cannot go back to where we've been. We can work around. We can change where we are now. Of course, we could build a change that would bring us to exactly where we have been before, but that's not evolutionary. That doesn't happen. That doesn't make sense. It's a waste of a lot of resources and time. And the reward curve changed. Now the possible activity changed. There will be more changes. We are adapting. We are learning how this system can work because it's unprecedented, and prepare for more change.
Yeah, I mean, I put out a post saying, it was a bit of a kamikaze landing, but hey, keep in mind, this thing is actually kind of awesome. Like, I know having negative resource credits and not being able to interact on the chain, that was bad, and not being able to, really have any activity, and losing all our voting power, all of that was bad. But those are kind of like one-time implementation things. That's not an ongoing thing. And so as I sort of like got my head out of this part sucks and I'm frustrated and I'm replaying 8 million times, when I got out of that and then was like, oh shit, now we can actually try to figure out exactly how much resources we need to give new accounts to make sure they have a good experience. We can start budgeting for these things. Now if like somebody wants to go run a business and that business is going to have transaction costs, they can figure out exactly how much Steem they're going to need before they set up shop, and they can figure out, do they have the amount of Steem that they need? Do they have the cash to make it work? Like just the ways that a business or somebody that's looking to interact here can figure out, well, how much do I have to be able to invest to make this all work? Now it's not just a like, well, there's a bandwidth system and currently you have enough. It's like now you can really plan up and down the road, and I think that ability is so crucial for being able to make good business decisions that it should make it easier for people to come here. And ultimately, I think businesses coming here is what's going to help propel us to the next level. So that was my sort of take on that one. All right, we have 10 minutes left. I think what I'd like to do is just open this up to anybody to give sort of their own whatever they want to say on exit from this thing. This is just a closing statement. I'm going to leave this as open-ended as you guys want it to be. What do you want people to leave thinking? What do you want people to know about you? What do you want people to think about this hard fork? Or it's your closing statement. Do whatever you'd like with it. Luke Stokes going down. Do you guys want to kick off?
Yeah, my closing statement would be excited that people are emotionally responding to this. Whether it's positive, negative, whatever, people still care. That tells me we have an engaged community. Even if people are upset, that means they care because they have expectations and they still want something to be done on this blockchain that they love and care about. So even people that are leaving, and they're really doing their rage quit, and they're upset, at least it shows that what we have here is connecting to people on a deep level. And I think people recognize decentralization is the future. blockchains, cryptocurrency, this is the future. We're engaged in the future, and we are part of something important that hopefully we can give to our kids in the future. And so I just want to stay encouraged, even in my own dark moments of frustration, to know, yeah, people are upset. And man, I was reading through the number of comments on the Steem blog post, and I got encouraged because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of comments. People still care. So at least that is a point of encouragement for me personally, and hopefully it is to you. And thank you all for coming. I mean, look at all the people here on a Saturday that want to be part of this conversation. That's awesome. So I appreciate the passion that people have on this blockchain and where we're going.
Any lesson learned for you, Luke? What are you taking out of this as a witness going forward? What do you need, or what have you learned?
I put a little bit of that in some of the posts. I actually did a post like right the moment the hard fork happened, and as luck would have it, that account had negative RC, so I had to post it through my witness account. But I put some lesson learns in that post if you want to check it out. You can just go to Luke Stokes there on Steemit. But it's, to summarize, essentially, a lot of what Tim talked about, checking the code reviews prior to the hard forks happening, as they're going. It's also improving the testnet, working with Steemit incorporated directly, and setting hard standards to say, look, I need this information from the developers in order to test properly, and I cannot move forward until I get that information, and be public about those expectations, both on my side and on their side. And I think that they recognize that also, and Andreki's been saying that as well. And so it's a matter of clarifying expectations so we don't lead to this level of frustration in the future.
Ferzim, closing thoughts, lesson learned?
No, not really. I'm happy I'm not in the top 20 anymore and didn't have to face the decision if I accept or reject this hard fork, because after we rejected 17, our expectations regarding more testing of the code and of what's happening and smaller incremental updates were our expectations, and I thought we would have agreed on that. I hope the lessons we learned with Hardfork 17 were really learned now.
I think that's it from Ferzim. Tim?
So, first of all, I just want to kind of reiterate and re-acknowledge the fact that this was a very bumpy takeoff. I think everyone agrees that the user experience over the past several days has been quite horrible and stressful, and as much as possible, we should try to prevent this going forward. But at the same time, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that I'm really excited for where we're heading. I think that the changes in Hard Fork 20, despite the initial takeoff bumps, are going to be very good for us going forward. And I think that the platform is going to continue evolving, and I'm just very excited. I think after we kind of get through this rough period and people get used to the way things are going forward and start, doing their cat memes again and all that fun stuff, that things are really going to be a lot better. And as far as lessons learned, this is kind of, I think I'm going to try to speak for the larger witness community, even though I try not to speak for others as much as possible. But I think one big thing the next time around is going to be that we should really be testing early as much as possible. There was some last minute issues that were brought up pretty much like the night before the hard fork, and there was some scrambling to get everything, all the ducks in a row. We're going to have 3 whole months to test the SMT hard fork before it's launched. And I really encourage everybody to use that time well and to find the issues early so that we can basically get everything worked out ahead of time, so that hopefully when the actual hard fork happens, that it goes much more smoothly.
Have you had conversations with Alir? Do you think Alir and Utopian are open to having testing be part of the Utopian reward pool projects?
Yes, actually, I did have a conversation about him regarding Hard Fork 20, and he was on board. I think, kind of tying into what I said before, that conversation happened a little too late. We were having it kind of right before the hard fork was going to take place, but next time around, I think, a lot of things are going to be done, including getting Utopian involved as far as trying to encourage other people, not just the top witnesses, to get involved in the testing process. And part of that too is going to be tutorials on, how do you test? How do you log into the test net? how do you report an issue in GitHub and all that type of thing. So I really hope that the next time around we can do a lot more to incentivize wider participation, because the more people we get playing around with this and trying things out and finding things that don't work, the more issues we're going to catch ahead of time.
Matt?
Yeah, I just want to say also thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing this on a monthly basis. It's a great opportunity to, talk to the community. I agree, that at this point we should hopefully start looking to the future. And I think that though it has been a rocky, past few days, it will get fixed. No one's goal here is to prevent people from transacting a reasonable amount on the blockchain. So, I've seen a lot of people said like, oh, they just want to make it so only whales can post and, whatever. But that's not the case. That was all unintended. So it will be the case, that new users will be able to transact a reasonable amount. And then, there are a lot of good things in this hard fork. Resource credits have been front and center, but there's a lot of good things and a lot of exciting things coming up for the platform. So I think if we can start looking forward to that and hopefully put this behind us, that'll be really good. And as far as lessons learned, I mean, as I mentioned, this was my first hard fork, so the entire thing was a lesson learned for me. We've talked about testing a lot. I'm also trying to put together, a learning group for some of the witnesses, top ones and backup ones, because before SMTs are ready for testing, I really want to, be able to actually review the code. I haven't done any blockchain development. It's been many, many years since I've done C++ development. But I want to start, at least once a week, getting together with some people and going through the actual code, learning in more detail how the blockchain works, to be able to both review changes that come up, potentially make new changes in the future, and also if there are issues, be able to, resolve it. So I hope that by the time we're ready to test SMTs, myself and a number of the other witnesses will be in a much better position to really understand the core code a lot better.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate the top witnesses coming over. Having the witness community be engaged, I think, is critical. That's why I host these. I'm stoked that Andrarchy was here and could go speak some for Steemit. And I know that they've been under the gun a lot, but I am not a Steemit hater. I think that those guys have done some incredible code, and I know we didn't land perfectly on this one or take off perfectly on this one, but there's a lot that's here, and that out of there's tons of lines of code. I think it's 5,000 and 3,000 changes. We've had a couple that missed, but we've had a lot that hit and are working really well, and this experience will continue to get better. I'm sorry that it wasn't a great initial experience. I'm very hopeful that it's going to be a much better experience going forward. And to me, my lesson learned is faster replays so that the downtime is shorter. So that's something that I think I'll keep championing. We're just about over. We have Making Stuff and Jack Dub coming up next. You're listening to MSP Waves Radio. This has been the Steem Witness Panel. This has been recorded, and I'll post it later. Thanks for not tearing into all of us. You guys had some great questions. You're all lovely people. I feel blessed to be here and blessed to work with you guys. And I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. And please keep tuning in to MSP Waves. And that's what I got. I hope this helped. I hope our fixes are working.